Now we've reached a point in the course where we're going to kind of shift gears. The T-SQL that we've been talking about up to this point has been about changing the structure of the database, creating tables, modifying or altering those tables, creating constraints, primary keys. We've talked a little bit about views, store procedures, triggers. We've kind of gotten a good basic foundation. And so from this point on in the course, we're going to kind of dive on into T-SQL here. And we're going to start talking about some of the query basics. And we're going to talk about query structures and thinking in SQL. And then we're going to go through each one of these 4 basic query types and really kind of dig into them, because this is really the meat of what you'll be doing out there. As a T-SQL programmer, T-SQL developer, whatever you want to call yourself, you will from time to time create tables, alter tables, and so forth. But by far, what you'll do most of all is use these 4 basic queries to either select or query or retrieve data results from your database, or you'll manipulate the data in the database in some fashion. So there are 4 query types that are used to find or manipulate data in your database, obviously in your database tables. That is the select query, the insert query, the update query, and the delete query. Now, real quickly, let's go through each one of these. They're kind of self-explanatory, but I want to point out a couple of things about a couple of these basic queries. The select query is what we use to retrieve rows from the database, more specifically, to retrieve rows from a specific table. Now, keep in mind, the data can be retrieved from one or many rows or columns from one or many tables. And we'll dive into that a little bit later on. But this is a very, very powerful command. And when you look at the documentation on it, it's a little bit intimidating at first, but there is a lot of power here. It's astounding how much power is in a select statement. The insert statement is what we use to add one, notice, or more rows to a table or view. And you're also going to see that in a lot of cases, these commands can be combined. And I'll show you some really cool stuff on select intos and insert selects, and we'll kind of combine these things. You'll see some really, really interesting things here. Then there's the update query. Now with the update query, we're going to make changes to existing data in one or more rows in a table or a view. And it can be kind of scary when you're using the update command on this more rows thing. But I'll show you some examples and show you some tricks on how to get around that when we get down to the videos where we're talking about updating our data. So update makes modifications to existing data in a table or a view. And then the delete command, pretty straightforward, right? It removes one, and here's the scary part, or more rows from a table or a view. Now, obviously, on every one of these, it says or view. If we delete rows or update rows in a view, we're actually making those changes to an underlying table. But if you look in the documentation, you will see or view on there, and so I included it here to keep from confusing you and making you think you've been shortchanged in the course here, okay? So that's your 4 basic query types. And again, we're going to do a section of videos on each one of these query types, and we'll especially pay close attention to the select query because that's where you end up living most of your life. What you will find generally is inside a stored procedure or inside some other code written by a .NET developer, and that's kind of rare. Most database administrators want all that code in stored procedures so they can see what happens. You're going to write update, insert, and delete queries in a stored procedure type environment. And those things are guarded like Fort Knox because these things manipulate our data. We want to know what's being passed in. We want to know how it's being treated. We want to know about error handling and all that sort of thing. And we want it tested before it ever goes on our production database. Then, since it's in a stored procedure, it always happens the same way every time. So as a result, you will very seldom write these insert, update, or delete queries. That's usually going to have a DBA's hand in it. You may write them, but what you're going to do most of the time are write these select queries to satisfy questions by accountants, upper management, supervisors, yourself to do your job, and a lot of times to provide result sets for reporting. So anyway, without rambling on anymore, that's the 4 basic queries. So now let's dive into those and really start honing some T-SQL skills and get you ready for that exam.